All right, rowers, this is a drill of my own creation that's kind of a kind of take on an existing drill. That existing drill is negative ratio. If you're not familiar with negative ratio, it is. I will make another video in a little bit about using negative ratio and when and how it is helpful with your training. But for flat ratio, this is kind of just a kind of thematic shift in that. And essentially with flat ratio and with negative ratio, you're shifting the stroke cycle and the dynamic of the stroke to match kind of what the name of that drill is. All right, so with flat ratio, whereas normally you're going to have a powerful drive and a relaxed recovery, even at the high rate, there's going to be power through the drive and the recovery is going to be relaxed, albeit a little bit swifter because you are going at a higher rate. With flat ratio, you are going to bring those two in line, and so that you should be moving through the stroke cycle at the same speed at all points. And we're going to do that by taking the power, or most of the power, out of the drive. All right, so you're probably going to be using about maybe a quarter to half pressure through your drive cycle and just focusing on flowing. Now the point of this drill is to help an athlete relax and to be clean and effective at race pace. All right, so with flat ratio, you're going to be executing it at whatever your target strokes per minute are for your competitive piece. And if you are training for on the water and you're doing indoor training as well, then I do recommend using the stroke rates that you want to be using on the water, and maybe deduct 2 to 3 if you're on a stationary erg. If you're on a dynamic erg, then you can use the same stroke rates in your training and for your faster pieces on the indoor rower as you can on the water. But if you are on a stationary erg, you don't have slides, it's not a RP3, it's not a dynamic, then go ahead and drop a couple beats off of that, and I would peak out maybe around 34 or so for a non-elite athlete, or for the vast majority of athletes, and maybe I want to go much lower than 30, 32 for the rest of everybody else. Even kind of a newer athlete, I would encourage you to get comfortable rowing your 2,000 meter pieces at a 32, and this drill is going to be designed specifically to help you do that effectively. So before talking about the drill, I do want to show you the drill. The first step for executing flat ratio is to bring your damper setting all the way down. All right, so we want to minimize the drag that you're working with because the power is not important. All right, and if we can decrease the drag, then it will allow us to still stay a little bit quicker on the drive without bringing a lot of power into it. So we can stay around that kind of quarter to half pressure mark. So you do just want to kind of row into this and get moving. Once you have some motion in the flywheel, you can start bringing the pace up, the cadence up to your racing stroke rate, but you want to keep the drive very relaxed. So I'm about 33, 34 now for stroke rate, but you can tell by the simple fact that I can't speak with you that I'm very relaxed. All right, I'm not putting a lot of energy into this. This is a relaxation drill. So that you can see that flat ratio. All right, normally if I were going to do a build that was at a 35, 36 stroke rate, I'd be very out of breath. I wouldn't be able to speak after it. That's not the case here. All right, so the pressure is very, very light. Now, in addition to just the general motion, and as you're watching that video, I should look like I'm moving the same speed throughout all parts of the stroke cycle, and that's where the name flat comes from. All right, it's a flat ratio. All right, there's no acceleration or deceleration. I'm just flowing from catch to release, catch to release. All right, there's a lot of technical focal points that you want to bring into this though, other than simply the ability to relax the body when you're moving at that cadence that you want for racing. There are also very specific needs in terms of what you're doing with your body through that cycle. And so we can talk about kind of where things break down when you bring up the stroke rate and how we want to use this drill to focus on them. All right. So the first one is definitely going to be posture, all right? And so you don't want to be slouched. You want to be sitting with good poise. You don't want to be stiff, all right? A lot of people will confuse sitting up at the release with being stiff and rigid at the release, all right? We don't want you kind of slouching, all right? So we don't want your belly button kind of pushing back, but we do want to sit comfortably. And a good way to know if you're sitting effectively at the release is just have someone come up behind you and push down on your shoulders. And if you can easily oppose that pressure then you're in a good release position. If you're too far back or too weak, as soon as they push, you're gonna collapse or fall back, all right? So real quick tip there for knowing if you're a good release position. All right, so we wanna make sure that we're sitting in posture, and specifically, as the stroke rate comes up, there's a couple things that happen. There's 3 points, and these are also gonna be really important for negative ratio when we talk about that, is that when stroke rates go up, people tend to blend the sequencing of the stroke, all right? So they will tend to start to move everything together, all right? Instead of following the typical extension of the hands, position the body, compress with the legs, all right? In each of those, there will be a little bit of blend for the most part at the edges of those, but for the most part, as the arm should be getting about maybe 80%, 90% straight before you're setting that body forward, and that body should be about 80 to 90% forward before you bring the legs up, and we should be fully committed with our position of the body by the time we get to about quarter, maybe half slide, so that as we finish that compression into the catch, there's absolutely no movement, relative movement of your shoulders, your upper body, your torso, your hands relative to those hips, all right? The only motion of the handle coming forward should be directly tied to the motion of the hips, all right? So if my hips move an inch, my handle moves an inch. I should never move my seat an inch and have my handle move more than an inch, because I've lost kind of control of that position, all right? And then as the stroke rate comes up, that is going to happen a lot with athletes, all right? So both they're going to kind of blend, all right? So everything is coming together. You'll get something like this instead of the separation. All right? And then the next focal points are kind of that combination of what will cause the handle to move into the catch quicker than the hips in that final stage. And so you could do one of two things, all right? You could collapse, all right? So we don't want us coming forward as we come forward at the high rate and kind of stretch and reach and collapse the body in the positioning that ideally, the good positioning that we have established here early in the compression. So we're gonna hold it and go. If you're moving really fast, it's really easy to get that extra lunge instead of sitting up and keeping the body fixed and allowing the legs to do their job, which is to drive that impulse through that front end, all right? And then the final one is compression distance, all right? And this is gonna be an issue with a lot of rowers, especially smaller, more flexible rowers, poorly trained rowers that have had the opportunity to have professional coaching or even a high-level amateur coach, is that you'll get a lot of people that will simply they'll slam into the front end, all right? And when you're taking the catch, generally you want your knee over your ankle, all right? You don't want your knee compressing over your toes, all right? And there may be a little extension there. You may go just a touch past that ankle, but not much, all right? For the most part, you wanna rely on the flexibility in your ankles and keeping your hips back where they need to be at that catch, at that change in direction of the catch, to be effective, all right? Because if you start to over compress, or if you start to let that bum come up under you, all right? One, if you let the seat come up under you, you're gonna lose the body angle. So if we're coming into catch with this body angle, and then we allow the butt to continue without the shoulders, we've lost that angle, and we're not in a good biomechanical position to apply power, all right? And then for the compression of the knees, if you compress too much, you're gaining length in the stroke at the expense of quickness and effectiveness, all right? And so the joints work really well at 90-degree type intervals, and they also kind of work in a place with those ankles where you're stretching within your limit, all right? If you're starting to go beyond that, by kind of losing the seat, then that's going to increase your ability to turn around quickly and powerfully at the catch, which is going to be essential for on the water performance in terms of that quickness, because if you can't be quick at the catch, you're never going to connect to the water and then leverage the boat past it. on the erg, it's important in just the biomechanical, all right? You're just biomechanically losing efficiency as you overcompress, all right? And so those are the 3 points that I ask my athletes to focus on when they're doing this drill, other than the relaxation, all right? Is ensure that you keep separated with the motion. Ensure that you're not lunging, all right? You're not allowing your momentum to carry you beyond the catch where you want to. You're in complete control of your momentum. You can change direction wherever you want to. If I wanted to do flat ratio and I wanted to stop at half slide, I could do that, all right? I'm not a victim of my momentum carrying me forward, that I can sit up and tap nice and easy, all right? And then the last one is compression. And now it's harder for me to overcompress just because, you know, I've trained myself not to do it and my body isn't as flexible as it used to be. But a lot of people, especially younger athletes, especially female athletes, or less mature male athletes that haven't really kind of grown into the body, will tend to kind of overcompress. They'll do it without sacrificing the butt. People that generally shoot the butt will definitely overcompress. It's very uncommon to see people kind of letting the butt come too far that don't also overcompress. But these are all things that you might have a rower that does these very well at a low, relaxed UT2 firm pressure, but as soon as that stroke rate comes up, they start to lose it, all right? And flat ratio allows you to work on those things at a high rate without creating a lot of fatigue, all right? So this is very much, it's a relaxation drill, all right? And as far as the splits, and this is gonna be very important, because this is a good way to know if you're doing it right or not, is that your splits, if you're doing this at the right pressure, which is very low, should be somewhere around your UT1 splits, maybe a little bit faster, all right? So if you are doing this and your splits kind of shoot down as soon as your rate shoots up, that is a sign that you don't have a really good control over your power, that you're really just kind of subject to the momentum of your stroke, and you should be able to turn power on and off like a light switch, all right? If you can't bring up the stroke rate without also bringing up the power, and granted that's not something you want to do in a competitive sense, this is just a sign, it's just a symbol of control in a mature athlete, all right? You're never going to take an elite athlete and say, hey, can you row a 36 at a UT1 pressure, and have them not be able to do it, all right? Because that is, the ability to do that is a sign of control of your power and your application, all right? So this will help athletes kind of practice that and to be able to turn things on and off. So if you're doing these flat ratio, if you can't drop the drag all the way, row at your race cadence, but not go beyond your aerobic effort, then that's a sign that you don't have very good control of your power and your speed, all right? And that's not a good thing. It's not good for pacing, all right? And then the final things, and these are something where you either need a really trained eye or you need a really good coach to kind of step in and help you out with this, is that you want to make sure that you have no hesitation or delay in your change in direction at the front of the stroke and at the back of the stroke, all right? And this is key, and this is where you're really going to be working on with kind of more of a varsity level rower, more of an advanced rower, someone who's been doing this and has at least a modicum of success in competition. This is where you want to kind of start focusing once you've got all those mechanical things out of the way. And so the next step here is for me to show you. So I'm going to alternate, and I'll talk through it. I'll alternate between doing it right and doing it wrong, all right? And I want you to really focus on the rhythm of how I look at the front end of the stroke and the back end of the stroke when I'm doing these things, all right? So we're gonna start out doing it correctly. And then the first thing I'll change is I'll hesitate at the release, and then I'll go back to correct, and then I'll hesitate at the catch, and then I'll go back to correct, and then I'll do it with a hesitation at both ends before I go back to correct, and then we'll finish, all right? But I'll talk you through and I'll let you know when I make each of these switches, all right? But keep your eye close on the rhythm and how things look. All right. So we're on a standard, hopefully well executed flat ratio. And now we're adding in a delay at the release. Back to normal. And a delay at the catch. normal. And the delay at both. All right. So a lot of different rates. So my stroke rate is kind of higher than I would normally do on that, just because I've got a lot going on. I'm trying to coach this and think about it and row deliberately bad, so forgive me that. But hopefully you were able to see kind of what happened when I added that hesitation at each end of the stroke. All right, I lost the rhythm. And for me, because I've spent a lot of time training and because I'm particularly good at sprinting, and I can row a 54 stroke rate with full power fairly comfortably, not easily, comfortably, that it's easy for me to drift up. But what you'll find with athletes, if you have an athlete trying to do this drill, you're doing this drill, and you're having trouble getting your stroke rate up without overshooting in that power, then the two things that could be. One, you're just pushing too hard, all right, you're not relaxing enough through the drive and just letting your legs go down, or you're hesitating at each end or both ends of the stroke, and that's forcing you to put in a extra power in order to get that stroke rate up to where you should be, all right, for that target of your racing cadence. All right, so each of those, so these are all different focus points, all right, and ideally once you get this down, you should be able to do this relaxed. I will generally, if I start an athlete, I'll do these for maybe 45 seconds to a minute at a time for this drill. And then I'll move, once I kind of get the idea, I'll move to doing 2 minutes at a time. Full rest in between, you're just tapping along for 2 minutes, all right? If you're doing these right, you should be able to get off, and it'll feel just like you just got off doing some steady state, some UT1 steady state for 2 minutes, all right? Because that's what your effort is. And then as you get closer to kind of racing, you may flirt maybe a couple times a season. I wouldn't do it too often. Do longer sessions. And I would even for kind of maybe like at the end of a novice year where you're really spending a lot of time teaching your athletes how to be relaxed, or maybe like a third varsity, maybe a JV, you know, as you're getting closer to racing, just maybe once a week, do something where you're going for the race duration at flat ratio, all right? And again, probably only need to do this once or twice in a season, and you need to do after building up, after getting used to doing it for 3 minutes at a time. Do like 3 by 2 minutes, 2 by 3 minutes, you know, 1 by 4 minute, 1 by 2 minute, all right? Doesn't have to be the same every time. All right, build it up to where you're comfortable at flat ratio for the amount of time it would take you to go down a 2,000 meter race course. And then once in that season, and your build up, maybe like, you know, 3 weeks or so, 2 weeks before your first race, do flat ratio for the entire duration of whatever your 2,000 meter race distance is, and just practice and use that also to visualize what you're doing for that competitive piece, visualize how you're gonna feel when you do have pressure, but more importantly, ensure that you can stay relaxed and hold a rhythm and stay technically clean and sharp at each end of the stroke and between the two ends of the stroke while you're going for that duration at that stroke rate, all right? And then when it's race day, you can worry about doing that with the power and the fatigue and the effort that come with that race speed. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I hope that helped. Definitely encourage you guys, again, check out gtsrowing.com. Definitely looking forward to kind of setting up these coach seasons, these digitally remote coach seasons for anybody that's interested. It'll be 2 to 3 practices a week. Very technically focused, all right? It's not just gonna be row along exercises. Plenty of people doing that. If you just want training sessions and you want a training program, you can get my remote coaching on gtsrowing.com. But if you're looking for a good, interactive, technical focus for an entire season, definitely check out those winter training sessions, all right? Each session will have a specific technical focus, or we'll build on the technical focus of the session before. You also have my phone number. You can text me video every day. I'll give you a little bit of feedback of what you're doing, how it's progressing, and what we need to focus on moving forward, just like any in-person coaching relationship would be, all right? So check that out. I hope to get a lot of you guys into that. But in the meantime, good luck with your rowing. We'll catch you on the next video. Bye.